Welcome, sensitive souls and truth seekers, to the beating heart of our community. Welcome to Turkish Spotlight Secrets. Tonight I invite you to settle into this virtual living room, where the lights dip low and the noise of the outside world softens so a more careful voice can be heard. What we're about to unpack isn't a bar-top rumor or a cheap scandal to ogle, but a layered portrait of trust, of quick judgments that cut like glass, and of the quiet courage it takes to choose dignity over drama. Before we wade into this storm, a small gesture means the world. Tap subscribe if you haven't yet and ring that bell so you never miss what matters here. For those who want to sustain our work of looking deeper, the join button is your gateway into our inner circle with exclusive perks. Your like and your comment are how you make your voice part of this chorus. Ready to look beyond the surface? Sometimes silence stretches so far, it turns into a roar, an echo that ricochets through the mind and feeds the most shadowy interpretations. For days, everyone watched the steadiness, the deliberate stillness around actor Barış Baktaş and read it like a headline written in bold script. There was no knee-jerk outburst, no late-night wall of notes tossed online, no attempt to pour fuel on an already sparking conversation. His quiet became a presence of its own in this tangle of misread signs, a third character on the stage, one that made onlookers lean in, waiting for the first definitive cue. It started with mere seconds. An almost throwaway slice of time captured in the sensory haze of a crowded venue, where the bass pounded like an anxious heart and the lights bled into dark corners. The unblinking eye of a phone camera clipped out a sliver of reality, Barış leaning in, close enough to be heard over the noise, a quick whisper into a young woman's ear. Faces near, proximity unmistakable, a tableau instantly interpreted as secret intimacy by those predisposed to suspect it. There was no beginning to frame it, no aftermath to anchor it, no audible words, just a breath of imagery cut loose from its roots, flexible enough to be twisted into fear or fantasy at will. Then came the night that fractured the ice. At a polished event tied to a brand he represents, beneath the harsh crossfire of flashes and LEDs, Barış faced the questions lingering in the air like a cloud of smoke. He looked tired, who wouldn't, but not broken, the center still held. His voice was measured and steady, threaded with feeling he kept carefully in hand. When he finally spoke, it wasn't in fury, and it wasn't to name villains. He stepped with precision, holding a delicate but decisive balance between candor and care. Each word sounded weighed before release, as if he could feel their weight in the throat. He reminded everyone of what gets discarded in the race to judge: you can't extract a person's intent from a single captured angle. You can't demand a full audit of private life simply because someone is visible. He drew a firm border. He refused to turn his relationships into a subscription feed for onlookers. He declined the idea of parading exhibits to soothe a craving for proof. And even without naming her, it was impossible to miss the presence that hovered over the moment. The woman the public has paired with him in the collective imagination for years, the one whose grace has stood beside his work and weathered its storms, Yağmur Yüksel. Let's pause together, friends of Turkish Spotlight Secrets. How many of us would have maintained Barış's composure? How many would have flared in anger, hurled words we can't retrieve? Do you believe a public figure is obliged to explain every breath and glance, or are we forgetting that privacy is a sacred boundary? Tell me what you feel in the comments. And if you value a calm, honest unpacking like this, remember to subscribe and help us keep a different tone alive. A close friend of Barış, speaking under the veil of anonymity to avoid stoking the spectacle, confided that the actor wasn't shaken by shouted insults or sharp jabs from strangers. What rattled him was the erosion of trust that begins when unknown people draft the script of your life for you. Imagine building a future on loyalty, then watching it rewritten by a camera that missed the origin and the ending. Imagine childhood friends and familiar faces turned into ammunition by those who will never know the whole story. That, the friend said, is what cut deepest. Even after his careful statement, the debate didn't evaporate, it shifted its rhythm. Comment sections split like a tide changing direction. Some dug in deeper, demanding more, urging him to publish what no one should be forced to display. Others took a step back and apologized, admitting that eager gossip had masqueraded as settled truth. The divide wasn't clean, it seldom is. But the tone moved, if only slightly, away from accusation and toward a wary kind of listening. If there was a thread running beneath his words, it was boundaries. They still matter, even when the world craves front-row access to every breath. He refused to push anyone into the spotlight to prove a point. He refused to stoke the appetite by opening doors meant to stay closed. He reminded everyone that being recognized does not mean being owed. And that love, even when it involves familiar faces, isn't a public exhibit simply because the names draw attention. What happens next is fogged with uncertainty. Perhaps the woman in the clip will speak and expand the frame. Perhaps he will stay quiet, choosing to protect a misunderstood friendship. Perhaps another angle appears, or maybe this 2-second fragment remains all that exists. What remains clear is this: Barış didn't reject the allegations by scrambling for alibis, he rooted himself in principle. He chose moderation when prodded, empathy when pressed, and truth without theatrics. That choice hangs now in the public space as an invitation for reflection on what our curiosity costs. Because this is larger than a moment in a loud room. It's about how we handle the shards of other people's lives once they land in our hands. It's about how a fragment of video can be honed into a blade. It's about how quickly possibility turns into verdict, and how stubborn the stain is, even when explanation arrives with care. Inside their circle, the weather is calmer than the internet storm suggests. People close to the pair say that, away from the comment screens and the scroll, friends check in, family reassures, work continues. The life that stood there before the clip still stands, scuffed by chatter, not shattered. It's the kind of reality that rarely trends, the steady rhythm of ordinary days. You can ride through a gale with quiet not because it doesn't sting, but because you know what you're anchored to. As outrage burns out and fatigue drifts in, the timeline looks different. Where there was a breathless rush to condemn, there's a pause. Where there was hunger for a meltdown, there's the uneasy recognition that maybe, just maybe, not enough is known to speak with such certainty. His honesty didn't silence criticism, it reframed the conversation. It reminded people that context is not mere garnish. It is the difference between what we think we know and what is actually true. So we circle back to where it began. With a snippet that lacked a beginning and an end, a sprint to judgment, and a man who declined to turn his heart into content. If more is said, we'll listen. If nothing else emerges, we'll sit with what we have. The constant is the principle he stood on, and the quiet strength with which Yağmur keeps moving through the noise. Their bond has outlasted attention before. It can outlast this, too, if given the air to breathe. And you, dear friends of Turkish Spotlight Secrets, where do you stand? Can you offer the benefit of the doubt, or does suspicion win today? Tell me below. Your voice shapes this space more than any algorithm ever could. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that join button if you want to support us directly, and share this video so a different kind of narrative can travel. Thank you for hearing the heartbeat beneath the noise. Until the next truth, we stay curious, we stay kind, and we keep our eyes open for the whole story. There's one more layer worth exploring, a quieter one that rarely fits in a headline: how this moment reflects Barış and Yağmur as people, not just as names. For years, their public image has never been about grandstanding. They built careful boundaries, not to distance the audience, but to preserve something human in a space that often consumes it. That's why the silence struck so loudly. It wasn't indifference. It was alignment with who they've always been. The friend who spoke about trust also mentioned how tirelessly they protect the rituals that keep them grounded, checking in after long days, respecting each other's work, refusing to let the industry's constant hum replace their own conversations. That's not glossy, it's steady. And that steadiness is the first thing rumors try to crack, precisely because it's the foundation of everything else. In the days since the statement, small gestures have mattered. Work colleagues say the set remained focused. A photo from a rehearsal surfaced, nothing dramatic, just concentration and half-smiles, but its quiet said more than any caption could. A family member was seen arriving with a bag of groceries, an everyday kindness that reminds us life does not stop for a trending topic. And somewhere between those ordinary details, you can feel the grip of the story loosen. What felt like a definitive cliff a few days ago looks more like a bend in the road now. Of course, the internet loves a reveal. It wants proof, a confession, a twist. But there's a different kind of reveal at play here, the revelation that not everything fractured in front of us is actually broken. That two people can hold fast without staging a performance to win back strangers. That a boundary can exist without becoming a wall. Maybe, in time, more context will surface, a longer clip, a clear angle, a voice explaining what a whisper couldn't. If that happens, let it be for clarity, not for spectacle. If it doesn't, let the absence teach us something about restraint. Because sometimes the truest things are not the loudest, and the most important answers cannot be demanded on schedule. If the last week underscored anything, it's that the distance between assumption and truth can be small on a screen and huge in real life. And closing that distance requires patience we rarely practice. For Barış, choosing careful words at that brand event was not a strategy session cooked up by a PR team in a fluorescent-lit office. It was a boundary reaffirmed in public. For Yağmur, carrying on without a grand proclamation was not silence born of fear. It was a refusal to let her life be choreographed by speculation. They did not trade their privacy for likes. They did not auction their history to buy a clean slate. They let their past speak for them and their present hold steady. So if you came here looking for fireworks, I respect the craving. But what we may be witnessing instead is a demonstration of something rarer. Two people choosing the long game, patience, continuity, and the understanding that time is the most honest proof there is. And as we close this chapter, perhaps temporarily, perhaps for good, let's remember the reason we gather here. Not to amplify the chorus of outrage, but to listen when the room goes quiet and see what's left standing. With Barış and Yağmur, it looks like what's left is not a performance at all, but a promise they keep between them, even when the world leans in to overhear. Stay with us at Turkish Spotlight Secrets for what comes next, whether it's more context or simply the steady hum of ordinary life resuming. We'll be here to notice the difference, to respect the boundaries, and to share the truth when it arrives, in whatever size it chooses.